I'm the Angry Spork. Some people, such as myself, enjoy Batman. Other people enjoy punching Nazis. I haven't had the opportunity, so I can't say from experience. However, one would think that would mean everyone would enjoy Batman punching Nazis, right? We'll find out as I'm taking issue with the two-part 1991 story, The Golem of Gotham, written by Peter Milligan with art by Jim Aparo, Mike DiCarlo, and Adrian Roy. We're starting off with Detective Comics 631, so let's see if this story makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads. But either way, Bat's gonna punch some Nazis! Bat's gonna punch some Nazis! The cover features Batman taking down some nondescript thugs, all of whom are black and blue shaded against an orange gradient background. It looks cool, doesn't give anything away about what the story's about, and it possesses a kind of subtle dignity that some comics covers today just don't have. Though this cover is a little less detailed than some today, so maybe that's part of the charm. Our tale begins with a pair of light-dressed men wearing balaclavas, shattering store windows, and attacking the darker-skinned proprietors. You'd think these guys would want to cover their face when they're committing crimes, but I guess that must have slipped their minds. Narration likens it to a time when Nazis were doing the same thing many years back in Germany. As an older gentleman in a green coat watches, one of the thugs sees Batman swinging towards them, and they amscray. The shopkeeper they assaulted is holding one of them back, so the creep shoots him. Instead of chasing the crooks, or even so much as throwing a batarang, Bats tends to the injured man, citing he'll live so long as he gets to a hospital. The coloring seems a little weird here. That guy's skin looks the same color as Batman's suit. Is he sick, or is superstitious and cowardly gray a common skin pigment in this universe? The old man, narrating to someone named Jacob, thinks that Kristallnacht is beginning again. Also known as Crystal Night, it was the time in November 1938 when Nazis started to attack Jewish businesses, homes, hospitals, leaving estimated hundreds dead and tens of thousands arrested and put into concentration camps, considered a precursor to the Holocaust. It's morning in the Batcave, and the Dark Knight notes that East Hamilton has seen an uptick in organized assaults of racial motivation. The district had long been a home to generations of immigrants, largely Jewish, but had recently seen an increase in the Indian population. Reports of beatings, arson, and desecration of graveyards or holy places sickens Bruce. When it stops making you sick, it's time to hang up the old capes. Nausea is a small price to pay to scare the bodily waste out of the criminal element. The attacks may be ruthless, but they do seem to be fairly well organized. The group responsible could be a handful or a few dozen large. It's only a matter of time before someone is killed, but all the Dark Knight can do right now is patrol the area. Meanwhile, the old man from before dumps a bag of clay onto the floor, and somewhere his mom is probably scolding him about tracking mud into the house. He narrates of a time when he and Jacob had carried such clay before, 5 decades back. Back then, they had failed in their attempt to create a golem, but in the here and now, the man vows to succeed. He loses track of time reading from the book Ystera, the Book of Creation, and walking in circles around the clay, much to the irritation of his neighbors. They hit the walls to get the Jewish man to stop, but that only makes him recall how he had stayed quiet in the 1930s, back when he was 23, and the Nazis came, destroying their businesses, and even when his friend Jacob and his resistance group were taken. That was the last time he'd seen his old friend. The old man etches the word emeth, meaning truth, onto the figure's forehead, and it begins to stir. Elsewhere, a different old man is in a place of worship, as are an Indian woman and her child, when 4 hooded men enter, clubbing the man and setting the place ablaze. As they make their escape, the fallen man, whose skin has changed color, odd, stops a straggler with his cane, telling him that he can take the opportunity to help stop the fires, that there's doubt in his eyes about his actions, and he's repaid with a kick to the face. That'll teach you to try and look for the good in people, and if you pity the sad state of my personal anguish, so help me. The straggler stumbles out, finding his buddies have left him behind, With the cops on the way, he and his personal narration captions leave. While Batman arrives and a woman tells him there are people still inside, the last punk out, Ricky, is shrugging off the old man's words as he sticks to the shadows, believing he was left behind as part of some initiation, when he hears what could be someone in the alley. The sound of Clink? You mean the guy from Hogan's Heroes?
Colonel Clink! Did you ever get my letters?
Bats has reached the old man, but can't get to the mother and child as the roof starts collapsing. He takes the old man outside to the waiting police and the woman we saw earlier.
He should be okay, but the others in there had no chance?
That's an odd question to ask. Why is there a question mark? Also, the depressing foregone conclusion of the dead mother and child seems a bit rushed, like he's not even going to bother seeing if there's another way inside or if they could have found a way out themselves. A scream is heard, and when Batman checks it out, he finds Ricky, dead.
Colonel Clink, why have you forsaken me?
With clay on his
very twisted neck.
Whom have I faced that would have anything to do with clay? I'll figure it out. I'm a detective.
Oh, Ricky, you're so dead, but for Nazis no tears are shed. Hey, Ricky! Hey, Ricky! I apologize for nothing! The other sociopaths naturally blame the people they attacked for their friend's death as they gather in what looks like someone's rumpus room in the basement. Blonde-haired Frank says they want this to escalate, and curly ginger Joe follows that up with how it'll show those white liberals there'll soon be a real war between their kids and those of other races, at which time they'll likely rethink their love of other people. After Frank, seemingly their lead moron, suggests they continue to add more pressure to East Hamilton, a stocky fellow named Steve asks if one of them should talk to their fallen comrade's family. A considerate suggestion, though not one that gets followed up on later in the story. Maybe just as well, given these schmucks.
Well, let's get our story straight so we don't incriminate ourselves. We weren't out murdering people and vandalizing property. We took him upstate to a farm where he can run and play with other bigots.
The old man has trailed the Golem to a cemetery, as it seems to know where they will strike next. The Jewish creator of the creature wants to see these foes, but his mind briefly slips into the past, and visions of goose-stepping thugs of his youth.
No, that was then. This is now. I'm beginning to feel as though I exist in two times at once.
Sheesh, Dr. Manhattan sure has aged. He sees a freshly painted swastika on a gravestone, then the pair of vandals responsible, Joe and Steve, the former of whom asks what the Jewish man is doing in a Jewish graveyard. Subtle. Steve tries to get him to lay off the old-timer, but when he uses his buddy's real name, he flips and reminds him never to do that on missions in their war. Now that's subtle. Their argument is called on account of a large figure in a white cloak. Joe tries scaring the figure away with his gun, but that's about as effective as when he actually fires it. As Joe uses his final moments to recall fond memories of being able to breathe, the old man holds no regret or shame for what transpires. Maybe a little cantankerous, the definition of which has apparently changed to grudge-holding mystic sicking his murder creature on bigots. I gotta brush up on my Websters. Batman swings across the city, noting that Ricky had a history of associating with hate groups and previously served prison time for assault and arson. As he heads towards the Jewish cemetery where a call was made regarding a disturbance, he sees a kid wearing the same getup Ricky Matthews was found dead in. He stops Steve, who begs Pointy Ears not to hurt him.
Why would I hurt you? Who are you running from?
Yeah, believe it or not, Batman was much more polite in the 90s. I mean, he might still bust your ribs or dislocate your shoulder, but at least he asks why.
Steve stammers what happened to Joe before he's silenced by a horror behind the bat. Caped Crusader's a bit too late to avoid being knocked to the ground, but narrowly avoids a concrete slab to the face. Because of his opponent's strength, Batman narrowly manages to swing away. There's clay residue left on his suit, just as there was on the dead body he'd found earlier, and the figure that almost smashed him is gone. Remembering the kid had mentioned someone's face torn off, he heads to the cemetery, where a cop is already on the scene, and the body draped in cloth. Looks like we got one hell of a vigilante on our hands, Batman.
Not that you aren't vigilante enough. I mean, no one operates outside the law to subdue criminals like you. I mean, the whole cape and the gadgets are just... I'll shut up now. Good call.
After Bats takes notice of the hate-tagged grave, we go to the old man's apartment as he expresses anger with his creation. Trying to get a photo of his long-dead friend to back him up, he scolds the golem for disobeying by chasing the other one that appeared scared and contrite. He wanted someone alive to spread word of the ghetto's new protector, and it didn't even bother cleaning any of the gravestones. After threatening to erase the E from his forehead Emeth... Wait, which one? Would he be Emph or Meth? Would he turn into Walter White? Anyway, the would-be guardian becomes the one who knocks his maker aside and storms out. Something it shouldn't be able to do.
Well, no one's ever really ready for parenthood. Sure, at first they're adorable when they're bumping off fascists, but eventually they become moody and distant and start blasting Yiddish rock music from their bedrooms.
Batman returns to the alley where his face was nearly squashed, finding minute traces of dry clay. Elsewhere, a man and woman are out looking for some late-night music, and the cloaked golem is in the shadows of an alley, apparently viewing the two as Nazi soldiers. As Batman muses the possibility that all he's doing is tracking dirt. Story of my life. Well, that and the whole murdered parents thing. He's not too far from the old man looking for his violent protector. Speaking of, it's tossing one of the music lovers into a wall, and screams draw the Dark Knight to its location. The guy's dead and his killer is taken off, but left a handy path of destruction to follow, and possibly another dead body. The noise it was making suddenly stops, and Batman is horrified when he comes face to face with the golem.
Are we sure that's not just a really dirty killer croc? I mean, he does live in a sewer. The story's not bad so far, though a severe lack of Bats slugging racist punks. I do like the art, as Jim Aparo's style of Batman has always been a personal favorite, and the shading helps a lot with expressions. Though there were a couple hiccups in the coloring. And a little odd that Batman's narrative captions were in cursive, but I guess it does help to distinguish it from the freehand of other characters with their own captions. Tune in next week, where maybe our hero will beat the golem to the punch. Ing of Nazis. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with part 2 of the Golem of Gotham. In the last episode, some racist morons were causing trouble in a district largely populated by immigrants, so an old Jewish man created a golem, legendary protector of God's chosen people. He took out a couple of the perpetrators and then a couple of random people it envisioned as Nazis for some reason. Batman's investigation of the area has now brought him to the destructive creature, and so we continue with Detective Comics number 632.
The cover, much like the previous one, is simple and fitting enough of the Dark Knight, this time perched upon a lamppost. Another indicator of a time when not every cover was a succinct version of the story or trying to grab your attention by claiming it changes everything for the 7th time this month. If I had to deal a criticism to either of these covers, it's that it doesn't indicate it's the Golem of Gotham story, so when I wanted to review it, it took me that much longer to find the proper issues. But it's a pretty weak criticism. The story continues with the golem smacking bats around while the old man narrates aloud what he's done. We jump to him in his apartment complex where he's distraught over how his creature is so disobedient when he sees that underneath the stairs he's walking down is a large burlap bag.
You do this every year, Santa. Stop leaving off-season gag gifts. I'm not converting, for crying out loud.
No, it's racist Peewit Steve, whom the old man recognizes from the cemetery. Apparently, after its first encounter with the Batman, the golem caught up with Steve, though no explanation where he got the bag, and brought him here. The elderly sort of mystic thinks it was so he could personally hurt the kid to alleviate his survivor's guilt, Not just of the Hindu temple torched last issue, but also of similar mines and their atrocities in Munich back in 1938. Steve's a little weirded out and takes his leave. Meanwhile, Batman has been tossed into an Indian restaurant.
There's blood in my mouth and curry sauce on my cape. I wish that were the other way around.
Okay, Batman likes curry, that's fine, but whose blood do you want on your cape, Bruce? And how often do thoughts like these cross your mind?
Re-engaging his opponent, he's perplexed by its speed and strength. It starts choking him, and Batman notices the sweetness of its breath, something which even he finds weird passing through his head at the moment.
Now, if smelling its breath had something to do with making someone else bleed, that would have been a normal thought.
All his physical attacks are doing all of nothing, and Batman notices a word he's never seen before on the Mudman's forehead.
Emeth.
When he utters it, the creature loosens his death grip, looks ashamed, and walks away. Bats takes a breather, knowing he'll recall where he knows that word from any moment now, after saying he'd never seen it before. Or maybe he'll just fall over. He leaves, telling the restaurant patrons to return to their meals.
And thanks for your help.
I'm kind of unsure how to take this. While any of us would want some assistance from others if we were being attacked by a giant clay monster, this is the same cape-wearing vigilante that's known for telling other cape-wearing vigilantes that he doesn't need their help or to quit crime fighting in a city infested with crime because they're not trained or equipped enough for it. It's admittedly funny, but also feels a little mean-spirited. I mean, what did he expect people to do? They went there for dinner, not to rumble in the dirt or with the dirt.
He retreats to a rooftop, wondering why he's so sleepy, since it couldn't have been from just having been throttled. As he gets ready to lie down for a little bit, he suddenly remembers that Emeth is Hebrew for truth, and tells a non-present Alfred to wake him up at 6:30. Which, he just might. The guy's a really committed butler. Meanwhile, Steve frantically seeks out a payphone, as we get some odd narration captions. Odd in that it's done in the third person, as if from the author rather than an alternative to inner monologue from a single character. Anyway, he calls up Frank, who's skeptical of his story of a monster, but will pick him up anyway with the rest of the crew. Batman's waking up a half hour later, which is too long for him, and he forces his body to get moving, remembering the old man he saw in the doorway where the Mudman's tracks were leading, recalling he heard the name Jacob. The Golem trashes a car with people in it, again envisioning Nazis, and we see at least one passenger moving. A cop tries confronting it as Steve and the remaining white supremacists break into the old man's home, with their leader Frank brushing the monster off as some guy in a costume, despite how it killed Joe last issue. So maybe we're up against a Jewish Schwarzenegger here.
Eat lead, Rabbi.
Sorry, that's not kosher.
Oh, Arnold doesn't have to be Jewish to whoop you. Speaking of, Arnold Schwarzenegger does indeed have a video talking about the Nazi philosophy, and regardless of your politics or ideologies, I strongly recommend giving it a watch. But first, back to the guy dressed as a bat.
Just as the cops discover how ineffective bullets are to the Golem, it starts to react to its creator being confronted by the hate group, who are forcing him at gunpoint to start spraying swastikas all over. On the very next page, Batman arrives too late. The thugs have already left, taking with them the old man, named Saul Zwemer, to the burned Hindu temple. Would have been nice to know his name sometime last issue, but there you are. Batman inspects the vandalized apartment, deducing that the goon squad forced their captive to mark his home, noticing the difference in technique to the vandalism of the graveyard. He sees a picture of Jacob, who looks a lot like the Golem, makes a connection there as well, and then focuses on the swastika.
Note to self, pour Wayne money into building time machine. Go back in time and punch Hitler. I don't care if Captain America did it first. Or over 200 times.
Saul is being interrogated about the guy in the monster suit, but while he is at first defiant, he recalls a memory of a similar situation, being grilled by Nazis under threat of pain to reveal where the resistance fighters are, specifically their leader. At the time, Saul was 22, feared for his life, and couldn't stand pain. As he did then, so does he presently give the name of Jacob Golem, and where to find his rebellion.
If at any point you thought this story was going to end up as Batman meets Fiddler on the Roof, here is proof that ain't gonna happen.
The old Golem Smith feels he's died over and over since his betrayal, the idea of the Golem growing in proportion to his shame. Speak of the clay devil, it's emerged from behind the Ganesha statue, and starts picking the creeps off, with its maker unwilling to put a stop to it.
Ava Nagila, baby.
The small band of small-mindedness is dwindling down to Steve, promising to release Saul if he calls his monster off before he ends the 18-year-old's life. Instead, the old man asks why he joined in on the terrorism. Turns out it was partly believing their culture was under attack, not that Steve actually noticed, of course, and partly because it was really fun. Sadly, this is an excuse used by real-life people for their own hate crimes. The Golem looms over Steve, who is swiftly lasted away by Batman. Thank God you—
Shut up! You don't deserve saving.
It honestly did feel kind of weird for Bats to say that, since he's gone out of his way on so many occasions to save any given Arkham inmate from death. But maybe it's more like the titular villains from the animated series episode The Terrible Trio. At least someone like the Joker has madness for an excuse.
The Golem, apparently growing in size, grabs Batman by the foot, but is then kicked in the E of its forehead, which seems to daze it. The Dark Knight goes to free Saul, saying the swastika he was forced to paint were the Asian version, going clockwise, figuring it was a clue to the Hindu temple. Funny thing, and this is what sticks out the most for me since I read this story, it wasn't a clue at all. Saul painted the only version of the mark he could stomach, and the white supremacists were too dense to realize it. However, because the Golem has been denied for 50 years, it can't be stopped and is beyond forgiveness. So Batman lunges at it, so he can erase the first E, leaving only meth, which is Hebrew for death. Meth is death. There's an anti-drug PSA for you. Saul says it's a good idea, but will only work if the creator does it. His voice distracts the clay brute enough for Batman to recall the barest information on the Golem's story, like how that also included a man named Saul, and tie his foe to the Ganesha statue. Unfortunately, it ends up pulling the statue down, and the debris hits Pointy Ears in the head. Though dazed and looking rather sad, he returns to the old man.
Kill the Golem, Saul. Please, erase the letter E.
Erase a letter? What would Sesame Street say? Seriously though, when did Batman find out the guy's name? I guess it could have been when he was poking around his apartment, but we never see him make such a discovery. Either that, or he's counting on the guy being named Saul, just like in the story he remembered. Which would be weird, and a little bit racist.
But Saul's not cooperating. The creature is his long-hidden shame and anger, and even its sleep-inducing breath is indicative of the old man figuratively sleeping to the truth. Bit of a stretch, but hey, who am I to argue with the guy? Though he betrayed his friend Jacob to the Nazis, he's using the Golem to finally fight back. And Bats, aching and battered, decides to skip nicer persuasions and use the expediency of intimidation. He mentioned how he's broken criminals and a man in his 70s wouldn't stand much of a chance, especially when it's clear he's afraid of pain. It works, and Saul wipes the first letter off the still-trapped Golem, reducing it back to inanimate dirt. Bats doesn't wallow in comparing himself to the Nazis that previously threatened Saul, because even though there wasn't time to convince Saul another way, the Dark Knight admits he never would have physically hurt the man, and apologizes for the scare.
Batman apologizing for scaring someone? I think Saul deserves that on a plaque because no one is ever gonna believe him.
The comic ends with Bats carrying the old man to get him to a hospital, leaving Steve hanging for the police.
Have fun.
But you're not even gonna punch him? I was looking forward to Batman punching Nazis, and he's just gonna leave the last one dangling there like a dust mite caught in a spider web. I guess if you want Nazis punched, you gotta do it yourself. Which seems to be a major theme in this story.
Seriously, though, something like this has been fairly common in comics for a while. A serious social issue touched on while involving a popular hero. Though Bats doesn't actually fight the white supremacists like we'd have liked, I'm sure, it skewed to the problem being handled by someone it directly affected. That, however, left a bunch of innocent people hurt or killed, so what takeaway can we get from this on how to deal with bigotry? I don't think it's eschewing self-defense or fighting back, but at the same time, letting your anger and your inner demons get out of control can have unforeseen consequences for innocent people.
The reason why the Golem was seeing random citizens as Nazis could have used more elaboration.
Between resembling his old friend Jacob and acting out based on the mental slips into the past, it seems like Saul shares some kind of mental link with the creature, but it's not really clarified. Is it something based on the original story of the Golem, or is it something the writer came up with, but spelling it out kind of slipped his mind? I suppose it could be argued that the sheer amount of shame and anger the Maker feels is supposed to explain why the Golem was so disobedient. Also, Batman realizes that the word emeth, for whatever reason, can make the creature stop his assault, but he only ever uses it once. He didn't think to use it the next time he found the thing. He even admitted to being scared of having to face it again, so what's the deal, Batsy?
I hope he knows that's not going to work on Clayface.
Though one thing that didn't need further elaboration was the white supremacists and their motivations. Sure, we could have been told that one of them was laid off, some black guy took his job, or that one of them was raised by an anti-Semite. But does any of that sound like a better reason than Steve's "it seemed like fun" excuse when they torch a temple with people inside? Fact is, this kind of hate is irrational and mentally debilitating. In some storytelling cases, delving into such a mind to better understand it might be compelling, but I think it works for this story that, pure and simple, these guys are just violent thugs who find it easier to blame and destroy than to get over themselves and build. They do hint that at least Steve was capable of being redeemed, but it doesn't go anywhere, and screw him anyway.
Maybe they should have looked at the family of the Indian mother and child they murdered and said a half-hearted "my bad" and jumped into lava. That seems to be some people's idea of redemption.
The art is classic, though it may have had a coloring error or two, and the storytelling is pretty solid. I did think it was weird that a character that got killed got his own narration captions, when thought bubbles would have worked, but it's not a story breaker. I liked Batman's narration. It felt like the literary elements of the medium were being appropriately utilized to complement the graphic art rather than just tell us what we're already seeing. A really good balance between the two. And even though he did create a monster that killed some innocent people, I still felt really sorry for Saul. I mean, you really felt his pain when he was describing what happened to him. I thought it helped make the story a bit more thought-provoking, getting the reader to ask certain questions they might not have before, like, how far is too far even when dealing with scum like these guys?
Overall, the story isn't epic or earth-shattering, and there are a few missteps here and there, but it's still pretty good. The events, though, are sadly relevant today, give or take a magical clay monster. We've seen an unfortunate resurgence in hate group activity lately, and there's really no excuse for it. Even a comic from when I was not even 10 years old could easily convey on which side of right and wrong people like these are. And maybe it's better they didn't entertain the antagonists' reasons for their actions. The fact is, in real life, hate groups rationalize their actions any way they can, formulate any lie, and avoid all contrary evidence because they're more comfortable in their fantasy than in reality. Batman didn't get to punch any of them. I'm the angry spork, and man, have I got issues.
Dreidel, 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 I made you out of clay.